Okay, so I just filmed some 20-minute fucking thing out in the fucking cold. Uh, in this level of cold, without more layers, 20 minutes was a lot out there, man. This is, I think a lot of people don't get the realities of operating in this level of cold. It's, you know, you have to do shit in bursts. Sorry, I'm like getting my fucking ear kind of back in fucking order and smoking and everything else. Like, probably shouldn't have gone live, but really, like, fuck it. I was just watching Sage Dynamics talking about how he's going Patreon only. That should be interesting. I don't think that's a winning business model for anyone. Like, I get that he is doing like a gun training channel and maybe that's different or whatever, but like I would be very hesitant to only do Patreon. I like that Patreon allows you guys to be able to tip me or whatever for doing this because, like, honestly, I get $25 a month from you guys, and it means a lot. I usually use it to buy some gun part, but like, I don't know. The fact that anyone likes my shit enough to pay fucking $5 for it really means a lot to me, man. Like, I don't know. Half of my thing is I talk shit about a lot of stuff all the time, and like, I'm a little ridiculous. I know I'm ridiculous. One of the things like a lot of people don't get is that while being ridiculous, I'm also probably not gonna fucking be the one losing most things. That's mainly just because, like, what are you gonna do about it? You gonna kill me? Good luck. I said this before. I feel like I'm cursed by God. I should have died 100 times over. I've literally picked buckshot out of my body that was shot at me by an angry housewife. Her husband was plowing me in their bed. I had to run for my life. Not my proudest moment, but at the same time, I have a scar on my tit from buckshot. So, you know, I'm that kind of a pirate hooker, apparently. I'm just like scrolling through the recommended feed on YouTube right now while warming up. I don't know what we're going to talk about. Hey, there's a viewer. Hello, person. Curious to see if anyone comments or whatever. I'm thinking about buying some red dot sights. Let's talk about that. Like, I know I'm going to move a red dot sight from one AR-15 to another, and once I do that, I don't know what red dot sight I'm going to get to replace that. Basically, I basically have to get a SIG clone of a big aim point at least for a little bit. Mainly because like their clone of the Comp M5 is only $120 on eBay. That is ridiculously cheap. It's cheap enough to buy and upgrade to a real aim point in like a year or so and have the SIG as a fucking backup. I kind of want to get another scope for that gun though too. There's a part of me that wants to turn it into like a retro build of some sort. And that's why like an Aimpoint like Comp M2 would be kind of cool to put on it. But like a scope of that same era, like a 2004, 2005, maybe a little later than that, maybe like 2008-ish scope. That's kind of what I had on there before. Was it was a Nut and Fancy special from like 10 years ago. I'm gonna build it as a retro carbine, and it's gonna be a retro carbine with a flat top upper. But it's gonna totally be built of like an era that was like 10 years ago. It's gonna be great. That's my plan for Loki. I think Aimpoint Comp M2 or Aimpoint Pro, something like that, is where I have to head. Right, like that's a still pretty viable combat optic, especially if you get the Pro, and it totally looks retro as fuck. Sorry, I'm playing with a balisong. I like the idea of doing a little bit more modern retro. Like, I kind of like wanted a blood diamond rifle, right? But it's kind of expensive to build one of the '90s vintage. But the second that you are okay with having it be mid-length and flat top, but then kind of throw in some like older school kind of shit vibes onto it, I don't know. It gets the retro kind of thing going. Half of my thing was I was putting on a KE arms lower, and once you do that, it's not really retro anymore. But at the same time, it is a fixed stock. I think that does kind of inherently make it a little retro-y. That's like the thing I like about the KE arms lowers is they do kind of have 1 foot squarely in Vietnam because of that buttstock. But yet they've like upgraded it, and now it has holes through it. The one that I really don't understand how it works is the hole for the QD cup. Like that goes so far through the thing. Doesn't the Where's the buffer go? I wish Russell Fagan would explain the wizardry of that hole. Explain your holes to me, Russell. If he's watching this, he just spit out his coffee. Guaranteed. I dig KE Arms and Russell Fagan quite a bit. I message back and forth with him on Instagram. I don't know if he watches this or not, but he knows of me. I'm the weirdo that keeps talking about projects for his company. The interesting part was one of the ones I pitched him. He was like, "We're actually thinking about that. We've been talking about that for a while." And I'm like, "Well, I know I have a pretty good idea of some really cool shit on how to do that and like in a weird way and like make it cool, basically." My real issue is that I have no idea how to use a fucking computer. Like I have this thing like built in my head of exactly what I would do. I'm not going to mention the product that he was actually interested in. I like threw 100 different products at him. Not 100. It was like 4. I really want to build a black powder survival shotgun that is battery powered and market it as a caseless shotgun. The world's first commercially successful caseless shotgun, and have it be like you like have some sort of a system to quickly unlatch and detach the barrel, whether it's some threads or like a bolt mech or something. You have a way to take the barrel off, and then you pack it from the back with the paper cartridge, and then you close the thing back on it, and then you have some battery system in the buttstock with a giant fucking igniter thing, and it burns up all the paper from the paper cartridge when you shoot it off, and you shoot it, shove another one in there. I contend to you that that would not be a gun in the terms of the ATF, and yet you could like get an ammo company to help you prepackage some fucking paper shells for one of these, just like a buck and ball or a fucking slug and a fucking some birdshot loads or whatever. Doesn't matter. It's a shotgun. I think that would be badass. That was the other one that I was really trying to get him interested in, but that's the one that I might end up doing myself eventually. He didn't see the brilliance that is the first commercially successful caseless gun. It really could be. Like, a fucking survival shotgun does not need to be shell fed. It could be black powder, especially if it was something like that where, like, it's a single shot anyway, and you're stuffing it from the rear, and, like, it's a takedown, and there's a lot going on there. And the electrical ignition system would be cool. Have, like, a brick of 9 volts in the stock with a capacitor. So that's what I was thinking. It was basically have a brick of 9 volts, a big capacitor, and a fucking model rocket igniter. And kind of wire all that shit up together. I bet it'd make something real interesting. The model rocket igniter might be a bit much. But I don't know how to make electronic thingamajigs, and that's like exactly what I would make. If you've ever seen one, it kind of makes an arc of electricity. Oh, I got to talking to Russell Fagan though because he ended up using some of my Instagram posts from like a billion years ago before I lost my Instagram. I got him screen caps, thank God, of me modifying cab arms lowers. One of the main things in their lawsuit was that some of the modifications that were, you know, done by KE Arms to make the KE Arms lower as opposed to the G-Wax lower is like putting holes in the lower for fucking QD sockets. In 2018, I literally drilled holes into a fucking cab arms lower to bolt in a Magpul QD cup and made a post talking about in-range TV and shit. Like, it was, the whole thing is just like, okay, well, explain this. It's pretty great. Like, I hope it ends up being in the list of shit that they actually use. I think it's not alone. There's other people that have sent them shit that's like, yeah, other people were already doing this. Russell Fagan is just the one that, I don't know, knew enough about fucking the process of how it was done and some other shit to fucking get it done. I love this lower, and I intend to support KE Arms, whether they lose their court thing or not. If they lose their court thing, I'm just gonna buy whatever the fuck it is they make. And that's basically the shit that I'm talking to Russell Fagan about. Is like, dude, everybody likes to plan for the things happening the best. Here's my experience with courts. They tend to end up fucking you. These people could win. You have made a lot of these. I would make as many as you can and fucking just stash them, something like that, and come up with other products and use the money from the other products to fight this thing in court again. And this is why I'm pitching him products. I'm kind of a mad, evil genius, and he somewhat appreciates it. It's rare. Part of it is that he's a very similar evil genius. He and Carl both, like, we like very similar shit, and as such, it makes him more open to possibly using some of my ideas, considering that the first idea I pitched him was the idea they're already working on. And some of the things that I told him about my version of it, when he was like, that's interesting. Like, yeah, I tend to have quality ideas. At least I think so. I don't really want to say what the thing is because they're not sure if they're going to make it or not, and I don't know where they are in that shit. But it is a product that any logical person would think to make. Leave it at that. Uh, I would love to fucking get a job doing that shit, but like the reality of that shit is no one who owns a gun company hires some weirdo like me or Russell to come up with shit for them, really. They hire engineers if they hire anyone. Usually they come up with shit themselves and then hire engineers to make it become a reality. That is, if you look at the gun industry, that's what happens mostly. Like, it's been a while since we had a real batch of like gun weirdos come up that just made new shit. And like this is the stuff that I keep talking about to Russell about is basically like fuck AR-15s. You know? I mean, you can't really, right? But like if they take that from you, why not build a gun from the ground up? Make it not an AR-15. Like this thing is some fucking space wizardry on the lower. Really, it is. I played with the Cav Arms and the G-Wax. I never played with any of the ones before those. Like those were the first commercially made viable ones. And the polymer on those things compared to the polymer on the KE Arms is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous upgrade and shit. Like I cut into the Cav Arms lower right to modify it. It's trying to think of a comparison. It's plastic, like a fucking like kid's toy is plastic, whereas the KE Arms lower is like Magpul type plastic. It's like a glass reinforced nylon, whereas the other one I think is also a glass reinforced nylon of some sort. It's just a shittier one. And like this is where polymer technologies have come a long way in 15, 20 years. Imagine if you fucking tried to make something newer out of it. Like, I don't know what that would be. Like what they've made is a beautiful thing because it allows you to use all of the infrastructure of the existing AR-15. So maybe you still do that. You could definitely have it still use AR-15 barrels. That would save you a lot. But like you'd have to get away from it being an AR-15. Honestly, I'm thinking bullpup. Like that would be the way to like really make it. No, no question. This thing is not an AR-15. But then you got like the question of how do you make a good bullpup? It also would be cool to make a gun that was built upper and lower like this thing. I don't know how you would secure a barrel into that shit though. And this is again the beauty of the KE Arms lower that they made is that it's perfect. The upper half of an AR-15 is already a thing of beauty. The lower half, basically every weak point in an AR-15 I don't like is in the lower, and this thing actually fixes a couple of them for me. The whole buffer tube castle nut assembly thing I think is a kludge, and it made more sense on the fixed stock. It makes increasingly less sense on the carbines, in my opinion. And then like this thing is like the most plain Jane basic bitch stock ever, right? I don't know. I dig it. That's enough love for KE Arms, probably. What else should we talk about? seems like there's like a lull in shit for Christmas in some ways, but in other ways, like I think I'm just maybe just not watching the news as much. I know what we talk about. The concept of a recce rifle. I don't have an issue with the concept. I have an issue with them calling it recce. Like that is a British thing. Like why are we calling it recce exactly? You should if you're going to build that kind of a gun, it should be called a recon gun or a recondo gun, not fucking recce. Just you know. Oh wow. Buffalo Mayor. People can feel their homes moving. I don't know what that is. MSNBC though. Probably ain't good. I'm looking through my feed again on here. Top two firearms for shit hits the fan. There's a good topic. What are the top two guns? I think like the AR-15 is pretty fucking self-evident. Mainly because like small to medium-sized game hunting and self-defense all in one thing. So then you've got that. So it's what's the second gun? Like it's are you going to need a pistol for like concealed carry or are you going to need like hunting guns? That would be where my mind would be at. Because like a bolt action deer rifle or a shotgun or something like that might be a good choice. But again, rifle wise, you've already got an AR. I don't know. I think I'd be tempted to either get a bird hunting shotgun or a concealed carry firearm for the second one. It's hard when there's not three. Fucker limiting it to two. I think I'd always go handgun. I would. Like I said the AR-15 would be like, that's obvious, right? It's not the first gun, probably. I'd probably pick the handgun as the first gun, right? It's just as a long gun to tote around in the end of the world. I think an AR-15 of some flavor is basically the smart money. It's lightweight. It's pretty powerful. It can kill a lot of things that are food, and it's pretty much made for people. The guy in the video I'm looking at has a lever action he's playing with. I would not pick a lever action. Although, as a hunting rifle, maybe. I think you could do better as a hunting rifle. Like, I never understood wanting to go hunting with a lever action versus a bolt action. I always liked going deer hunting with a Lee Enfield #1 Mark III. I like those style of sights, and those were dirt cheap when I was growing up. And I scored a couple of different flavors of that thing. That some were in 308 and some were in 303. And the one that I liked to go hunting with was a 1917 BSA in 303 British. I like those guns because for me, at 100 yards, they shoot dead nuts. Which for like a deer hunting rifle, I think is pretty much what you want. There's not a lot of those military surplus bolt actions that shoot to point aim at 100 yards. We got two people watching now. I always wanted like people to like say something or interact with or whatever, but like if people do that, then I get too distracted to talk about anything really. Get all arguing with people in the comments. I've been learning so much about like biblical shit lately that kind of my conclusion about most of it is that we've been lied to by people from the Middle East our entire lives, and for some reason we continue to fucking buy into their bullshit when in reality, like, you could just write your own magic book and say it fucking, Washington D.C. was the Holy Land. I really think there's just a lot of fucking like lying. That's what I see anytime I see anyone talking about like religious shit in the Middle East. If there is some hidden truth there, we will never know it because it's hidden by like the Vatican and the CIA. Ooh, government admits what's in the national parks. Dun 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 dun. I watch a lot of stuff about like wolfmen being loose in the national parks. I don't know why, but they keep putting it in my feed on YouTube, and it honestly, I like to smoke a little bit of weed, and you know, hearing about wolfmen in the national forest that seems to go with that. And like, I already like Les Stroud, and when I started watching his Bigfoot shit, like that's some gold right there. It's kind of the same. Like I'm pretty picky about my Bigfoot stuff. I like the Les Stroud Bigfoot stuff quite a bit. He's out there hunting for squatch with some of the craziest motherfuckers on earth, alone in the middle of the Canadian Northland, getting rocks hurled at him. Like honestly, it made me start believing some of that shit to some extent. I'm not sure why they want us to fucking believe in wolfmen and Bigfoots and whatever. Like the conspiracy theory time, they don't want you to go out in the woods alone for whatever reason. They don't want you to, connect with nature and be one, like enjoy life. They want you to stay suckled at the teat of the fucking machine and like I don't know. It's not gonna be good. That's what I see when I say that shit. Maybe that's my like anti like industrial anti fucking everything. Well, come on, there's got to be something better to talk about. Let's talk about scopes. Fucking, there's so many people that use low power variable optics now. Like, I'm not sure exactly what made those popular. I don't like low power variable optics because I don't like one power scopes usually. But I'm going to end up buying one probably because I would like to upgrade from my 2 to 7. And they don't make a nicer version of a 2 to 7 scope apparently. Like Leupold makes one, but it's not. It's a lateral move and it costs $300. I get that, like, oh, the one power might come in handy or whatever, but like, here's my pitch: the 1 to 8 is a much heavier scope than the 2 to 8. Much bigger scope, and the 2 versus the 1, neither one of them are looking through a red dot. Doesn't matter to me at that point. I'd rather have the 2 power because at least I get a little bit of magnification, I guess. Like the weird fisheye of the 1 power just puts me off. Also, those scopes are ridiculously expensive. Like not all of them. There's some Vortex ones I looked at that were reasonable, but like there was also like a Vortex that was $2,500 or some shit. And that's where like you need to realize that you're paying stupid money. There's like smart money in guns and optics and whatever, and then there's just like they know that there is a percentage of the people that are fry from Futurama that are shut up and take my money, and they don't even care what it costs because this was issued to a Navy SEAL who has the silent footsteps of a Navy SEAL or whatever. Shit gets annoying, and that's why that 1 to 10 vortex is fucking $2,500. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's nice. That's a lot of money for a piece of glass. I still think that most optic companies are kind of overpriced, to be honest. They're either overpriced or they're selling junk. There's like nowhere in between. Why is there like no company that just makes pretty decent tactical scopes for $150? Like that should be a thing. Like look at Weaver and Leupold and like the Redfield and some of these like they make really good scopes in that $150 to $300 range. Why don't you just make a scope of that quality at that price and put tactical features on it and harden it up a little bit? Like you wouldn't have to do it a lot. Like the fucking Weaver I'm running right now has survived being banged around quite a bit. There, a scope is not completely fucking vulnerable or whatever, but like you could do some like common sense shit to it to make it a little bit better. Beef up the fucking front end of it for one thing, beef up the towers, maybe armor the towers a little bit. Someone should do that shit. I think you'd be amazed how many people would buy those scopes over some of the rest of this shit if they started using them side by side. This is my contention. I will add though that the new thing with having the fucking like super bright red dot illumination thing with the one power, like it's trying to give you a red dot. It's not. It sucks. It's just again. Just because it looks the same doesn't mean it does the same things. And one of the things that I like about any red dot, whether it's EOTech or Aimpoint or whatever, is no eye relief, no eye box. It's like using iron sights. You put the red dot where you want the thing to go, and it goes there. So for any one power use, I'm always going to go, well, it's not a red dot. And to be honest, I'd rather have iron sights than a scope for even a one power scope for a lot of shit. If it's a one power scope versus a 2 or 3 power scope, that's no difference. It's still using a scope, basically, to me. Maybe I'm a weirdo. That really like makes me like go, okay, why not get like a 2 to 10? And I guess the reason why I don't buy a 2 to 10 is weight. I got the 2 to 7 that I have because it was cheap and it was a scope that I had wanted for a while, that I had seen for a while, that was $100 that I had seen Nothing Fancy recommend for like 10 years. And say what you will about Nothing Fancy, if he's recommending something, it's working for him, and he actually does use his stuff. Well, at least more than most people. That's how I ended up with that thing. I think modern optics are basically a junkyard. So I'll take a recommendation from Nothing Fancy if I can get it. I did see a SIG optic that I really wanted, but it was $929. So I'm not going to get that. It was a Sig Sauer 2 to 12 by 40 with a red dot mount built into the back of it. It's perfect. It's probably heavy, but it's perfect. And that's one of those like SIG should get the thing that they got with the red dots. SIG knew that there was no market for a $500 red dot. unless you like won a new U.S. Army contract or something like that, and they weren't going to do that. So they took over the budget market in America of fucking red dots. But for their scopes, they're like, oh, let's make like the best scopes ever. And like legit, I think they're actually getting an Army contract. Or was it them or Vortex? I don't remember. One or the other. I was impressed that one of the two of those companies was in the running for fucking being an infantry scope. That's interesting. Interesting development. It made me look a little bit harder at those like 1 to 10s. That's like where those really high end ones of those are coming from. But if I'm going to spend, $2,500 on a 1 to 10, I would rather spend $900 on 2 to 12. That's how do you want to spend your money? What do you want to carry around? I guess. Let's look through more videos. I'm gonna smoke. And now for the smoke break. I know we can talk about Christmas Carol, 1984 with George C. Scott. This is free on YouTube. This was my grandfather's and mine like favorite version of this story. He showed it to me because it was his favorite, and he showed it to me after I had just fallen in love with the movie Patton. So yeah, this was my favorite version of A Christmas Carol too, because this was fucking Patton playing Ebenezer Scrooge. Great movie. It's totally the time of year to watch it. It's, I am not really much of a big Christian person. Like, I don't like that shit, to be honest. I like some Christmas stuff because it's like pagan and Roman, really. Like, this is a fucking festival about like the unconquerable sun coming back from its fucking trip into the fucking nether regions or whatever. Like, Christmas is its own thing. Like, I think Christmas is a Roman holiday, and it's a holiday of like the things we've conquered. You get into that, but like all of the elements of Christmas are things that the Romans came in and they took a thing and they're like, okay, then let's make that ours, and then let's make that ours, and let's make that ours. Then you end up with this big celebration at the end of the year of all this conquered shit. And then the Romans get conquered by fucking Christianity, and they put this whole Jesus-y label on their big ass fucking like debauchery fest that they had every fucking like December 25th. It wasn't debauchery. I think it's basically kind of like our Christmas now, where it's like a time to be with your family and go home and have, you know, traditional food and whatever. But like their Christmas celebrations were not what we do. But like if we went to an ancient Roman town having a Saturnalia fest or whatever, you would fit right in amongst the revelers. They'd be singing different carols, and like some things would be like the proto version of things that you know. Like there'd be a fucking like giant burning log someplace. That's the Yule log. But literally, they took that from the fucking like Germanic peoples. Anyway, the George C. Scott Christmas Carol is one of my favorite Christmas movies, and it's free on YouTube. See what else we got. There's a prepper channel that I watch on here that I'm gonna watch when I get done with this. Pinball preparedness. I don't really know much about him other than I see his videos occasionally, and I like hearing his thoughts. He says good shit. I'm sure he's one that's being pushed by the algorithm, and I'm not sure why some prepper channels are pushed by the fucking algorithm, but they like really are. Like Vera Independent was for me for a while, and like I finally just after going to fucking meet him and that whole experience, I was like, yeah, I never want to see your videos again. In case you didn't catch that, Bear Independent is basically running a cult, and I'm not a fan. I went down there just to like help out and hang out and like I don't know. I don't know why I went. I was compelled to go. The power of Jesus was calling me to go and hang out with Bear Independent and find out that he runs a cult. Mm. Well, I think I'm going to call this good. I don't know what else I'm going to talk about. I do kind of want to get a replacement scope eventually, right? And like one of the things I'm thinking about is whenever I do that, I want to upgrade from a duplex reticle. I think I'm just going to get mil dots, and that really restricts what I'm looking at. Basically, it's like I don't want an overly complex reticle, but I do want mil dots. Basically, that's all I want. Maybe I should get a Leupold. It would be dope to get like a Leupold Mark IV or something like that, but those are even fucking insane money now. Forget how much those were when I looked them up, but I want to say that it was like $4,000. That seems outrageous. Like, don't get me wrong, I get it. Scopes cost money. They don't cost that much money. It's like you're paying for some name again. Leupold, let's go there. Mark 8, that's what it was. Yeah, $4,000. It's fucking nuts. So they're 1 to 8. Look for a Leupold Mark 4. Maybe that'll be cheaper. So I do kind of want a retro scope and like a Leupold Mark 4, 2.5 to 8 would do that. And it looks like they might be discontinued and probably the better part of $1,000 to $1,500 if you can find one. Well, that's fun. So that's at the point like you might as well get the Sig, really. Like, it's less money, probably lighter weight. But this is where like I really would like to have some optics on that gun that are like real optics, like something military issued from back in the day. I want it to be like someone built this carbine in 2010 to go to Africa or some shit, and decided to have some nom flare and give it a Rhodesian paint job. That would pretty much give me the reticle I want, though. I don't know. Need a cheaper version of that Leupold. Go Leupold. 2 to 8, 2 to 7. They do make a 2 to 7 by 33 right now. That's $300. It comes with some sort of a Huntplex reticle. That I could dig that too. It's like if I was going to buy a replacement for my Weaver scope, the closest thing that I could get right now is the Leupold VX Freedom 2 7x33. And that would be cool, but it's not a military Leupold, it's just a Leupold. I don't know. It's probably a stupid waste of money to get that Leupold Mark IV. I wonder if there's any difference at all in build quality between the fucking Leupold and the Weaver that I have. Or if it's just different names on the same fucking glass. VX Freedom. I guess Leupold is trying to make some tactical scopes in their VX Freedom line, at least. That's where this 2 to 7 is. And I do like the Huntplex. Like, it's kind of like a mix between a duplex reticle and a German pointer kind of style thing. I wish it was mil dots. If it had mil dots in it, it would be perfect. Because really, I don't want turrets, and like that's the Leupold Mark IV. The reason why it's so expensive is like it's illuminated, it has turrets, it has a 30 millimeter tube, and I don't want any of that shit. My thing with the tube is okay. The bigger diameter you make the tube, the bigger diameter you make everything on that scope. Therefore, the heavier it is. And I get that like bigger tube equals more light equals better scope. But you need to get that everything I've ever shot in real life I did with a 1 inch scope. So I don't know. I think I'd take just for a lightweight build in particular, the 1 inch. If you're going for other shit, then there's other things. But like most of my thing is, hey, I don't know that I'm really going to be using this. So we're going to make a little bit of concessions on some features to save weight and like going with a 1 inch scope that's not illuminated that doesn't have target turrets, all of that shit just saving weight. And really, are you going to need an illuminated scope, especially if you have a piggyback red dot? Probably not. This is where I need to figure out the mount. I want to like build one of these at least for myself that is like you know, this is what you should make or whatever. Like I want to do a video on it. Maybe whenever I do that, I'll upgrade the optics package on Moon Tiger and retire that Weaver to some, you know, spot of greatness, or maybe move it to this carbine. I could move it to Loki and then paint Loki to match that scope. I don't know that I want to do that though. But basically, if I could figure out, let's say we go with that 2 to 7 Leupold as like the scope to use for whatever this is I'm making. Come up with the mount and come up. I've already got the mount that I'm going to use to piggyback a red dot onto a scope is from PRI, and it just puts a section of 1913 rail over the fucking scope. And I'm just gonna bolt a Holosun T2 micro clone to it and call it good. If you're really on a ball and thing, like you could get a real aim point. I think that's unnecessary though, especially using a Leupold hunting scope. Like we're not spending a bunch of money. Not to mention that like even getting like a Leupold, sorry not Leupold, a fucking aim point H1, it's gonna cost you like $500. Like whatever mount that I would get to fucking put the scope to the gun is probably gonna be a good couple $100. And that PRI mount to put the red dot on is $50. So what? That's 200 plus 200 plus 300. That's $700 plus 50 for the mount. $750 fucking optic. It's all said and done. That's with the hollow sun. Now imagine putting the fucking real aim point on that and bring it up like $1,200. I do think in some ways you'd be better off with something like that though, with the lighter weight scope and the 2 to 7 range versus the like 2 to 10, 2 to 12, whatever. And then instead of having a little micro dot, you have a real, you know, T2 sized optic, which is a micro dot. I get it, but it's not one of those like little pistol slide mount type things, you know. Forget what those are called, like an RMR. It's not an RMR. It's a closed emitter, real red dot that, like, if you mounted the red dot correctly on the scope, you can just run it as a red dot. Like, it won't make any difference to me whether it's fucking a little higher or not. If anything, with our current shit, higher's better because it's, using it passive with night vision. I really think this is kind of the optimal optic, this thing that I'm describing here with like 1 to 8, 2 to 7 scope with a red dot on it. Pick whichever one you want to get. If you want to go 1 to 8, that's on you. Seems like the jump to 1 to 10 isn't really worth it. And this is where I'd be like, well, how much are 2 to 10s? But fucking 2 to 10s are expensive as shit too for no apparent reason. Again, like that SIG optic that's 2 to 12 by 40 with a red dot mount for $900. That definitely made me want to buy it, and that's rare. That I'm like, man, give me that fucking $1,000 scope. In reality, though, like I think it'd be kind of cooler to get the Leupold Mark IV because what that SIG scope probably isn't gonna be worth dick in 100 years. The Leupold Mark IV could do most of what that thing does, and is probably going to be worth money in 100 years. That's a consideration to make on some of this shit too. Is, hey, if you're gonna hand this shit down to the kids or fucking nephews or whatever, maybe you should buy the one that's gonna be worth more money in the future. Especially if it's, hey, both of these are $1,000. We're gonna buy one or the other of them. One's made by Leupold and was military issued, and the other one was made by SIG using questionable shit from China. Which I don't know. Like, it seems like their electro optics are all definitely made in China, right? But it's a question of, hey, where's the rest of their optic shit? Where does that shit come from? Are we being sold hollow sun scopes with US slapped on them? Kind of seems like it to me. Well, I'm gonna call this good here now that we ran off the last viewer. Hope somebody got something out of this. I'm gonna do a video on my scope setup once I get it all together, and eventually, when I make another one, I'll get that Leupold, I guess. I don't know. I did find a Weaver Caspa on eBay. It would be dope to just build an identical fucking setup. Just this is what we do. We buy a Weaver Caspa and a Weaver fucking mount, and you know, really it is $100 scope, a $50 mount, $50 adapter, and then whatever red dot you want to put on it. Pretty dope way to go. It works for me. That's like the real hold up for me on going to that Leupold is I'm wanting to spend a bunch of money on optics right now, but it's for the other gun. And if I bought that Leupold, I would definitely put that on Moon Tiger and not on Loki. And then that would mean that I had just painted this scope for no particular fucking reason. But I do prefer it not being yellow. So there's that too. And we're like, I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks I would prefer Loki to not be yellow as well. But I do kind of like that, like this AR-15 is a Loki. Get some urban camo paint. The cool part is it'll always have this Loki paint job underneath it, even if I put other stuff on it. It'll eventually have little bits of it peeking through. It's doing that on the scope, and that kind of makes me happy. I like having the fucking layers of fucking like Boba Fett going on. See you guys later.